So why do this series? Well, the pandemic changed so many things, or maybe it just accelerated them. While I was at home, I finished writing a book that I had started for and about the big-hearted business owner. I saw them and many others repurpose their factory floors for hand sanitizers, work on their supply chains to import PPEs, go out of their ways to help employees. It was very inspirational. And right after publication of this book, I became a screener for the Civilian Medal of Honor Awards, where I had the unbelievable privilege of reading stories from dozens of people who either committed some kind of heroic act to help another, a charitable act to help another. It also highlighted charities and even youth who were doing amazing things. And I realized, the volume of bad news in the media now far exceeds the volume of good news. And yeah, it's always been like that. You know it, though. It's worse today. And I felt that I had to do something to tip the scales, even if a little. So why the title? Well, what is beauty? There was a really fantastic Ted Gioia Substack article last year about why beauty in culture is so dangerous. Your and my version of beauty are different, but you know it when you see it. And you look at it with bedroom eyes. It doesn't require some institution telling you something's beautiful or verifying that it is beautiful. Somebody can't tell you that this thing is beautiful. They can't manipulate your opinion of what is beautiful. Not really. And it doesn't need or want theory or interpretation. And there's no intermediary telling you what is beautiful. But we know it when we see it. It's beautiful music that makes you feel deeply. It's a painting. It's a novel you can't put down. It's a story that grabs you to the core. It's a sunset. It's a person you can't take your eyes off of. It's also a kind act, opening a door, helping a charity, rescuing someone in distress. These are all things that call to us deeply, and you don't really know or understand why. It's just how we're made. And I believe that it's sourced by the most powerful of forces, love. It's what makes us human. It's what allows us to forgive, helps us feel grateful, keeps us happy, alive, and human. What is beast? Well, there is more money than ever before in politics, big media, big tech. They demand our attention. And frequently they do so by stoking our fears. It's those fomenting anger for their purposes, not ours. It's the news telling us how we should think about things, not what is happening, not just giving us the news, but telling us how to think about the news. It's the screen in front of us, bombarding us, telling us how to buy, telling us to buy things or to surrender our attention to things that probably won't help us in the long run. It's not the opposite of love. It's the forgetting of ourselves and our own humanity in servitude to another. Beast is loud. Beauty is quiet. So who will win? Well, it has been and it will be an epic battle. But I believe that in the end, love always wins when good people do beautiful acts. And here's the thing. There are good people all around us. More than half of Americans have helped their neighbors in some way over the last year. Over 25% of Americans volunteer for charities. And over $500 billion was given in 2023 to charities. As we're releasing this series now, I've already watched and heard dozens of stories of how people are helping others during this devastation from Hurricane Helene. People carrying water and food up there, donations being made. And it's like this every time. People, face to face, eye to eye, helping each other. So I hope many will be inspired by these stories, maintain hope that there's still more good than bad, and perhaps even meet your own moment That's a Medal of Honor phrase of helping your fellow neighbors when the time arises. Welcome to Beauty versus the Beast.
Once I saw a note that came across it, child was, bleeding pretty profusely. I knew it was a real call at that point.
Man.
And it just happened to be kind of, I guess, coincidental that the call happened to be right around the corner from where I was in Trident. I instantly, what we call, jumped the call before dispatch was even able to dispatch it out. Long story short, there was a child, 2-year-old female, who somehow was able to unlodge herself from her car seat as the vehicle was exiting the exit ramp, and the door opened up and she was kind of flung from the vehicle. When I arrived on scene, I kind of acted and just did what I guess anybody that was trained to do this, it's my job to protect the community as much as possible. And myself, basically at the same time, jumped out, ran over, grabbed the child, picked up the child, and we happened to notice that her right arm had been severed from the incident.
When I got the phone call, she told me, she said, "You need to come get Journey." And I heard the panic in her voice, but I wouldn't think that it would be her.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. I said, "Are you okay?" She was like, "No." She was like, "Journey just fell out of the car." Journey fell out of the car on the interstate. And when I heard that, I just started freaking out and I started screaming. And then I heard her crying, saying, "I want mommy, I want mommy." You don't know if she could breathe on her own, but we have to try. And she did it.
She did it because she's strong.
She's strong too, yeah. She's very strong.
She's very strong. What are y'all's hopes and dreams for this miracle child journey?
My biggest thing right now, I just want her to have mobility in her hand and get that feeling back in that arm. That's my biggest concern. As far as her future, she's very unstoppable. She's a very strong baby. We got potty trained. She gets herself dressed with one hand, the shoes on. She's very independent for her age, so she's learning how to work with it.
I'm just happy that she's with us, and you can just tell, like, looking at her face, that she's just gonna bring a lot of smile to people.
I mean, you can see the intelligence, energy, and attitude in those beautiful eyes of hers.
We talk almost weekly, sometimes every other week, but we still stay in contact, and she keeps me updated on everything that's going on. So
that's amazing. Whatever happened to the real train spotting characters? Did they end up okay, or did life run them over?
Got enough area known for crime. You've got to leave as soon as possible. It's known for drug dealing, knife crime, motorbike theft, junkies and that. There's some friendly people and there's some wee bastards.
There's another guy, Dean, who joined us about 7-8 years ago, actually as a participant in our para football. His predominant challenge, I think, was that he wasn't working at the time. He had lacked confidence. Once you lack confidence, it's almost a downward spiral. So then you begin to question yourself. Do you want to go out in the morning? Do you want to go and face up and talk to people? If you don't have a job, are you really are you worthless?
So he wasn't even leaving the house.
Yeah, that's right. So we call it para football, or disability football. Is for all ages. So it starts with the schools and goes all the way up. So Dean came along, and we were investing heavily in that program because we've actually now got 100 boys, males and females on it of all different ages. Wow. And I think as it grew, Dean grew with it, because suddenly he could come down 2-3 times a week, play with people with similar issues, chat to them. And over that time, Dean has evolved from being a player to being a coach, a volunteer coach. He then met his future wife and he proposed to her on the pitch.
Seriously.
They've now got 2 kids. I don't know where he finds the time to do it, but he's now volunteering 20 plus hours a week across a variety of things.
What is the background behind the Ultras?
So the background, it probably started about 2 years ago. So in European football, there is a push towards these kids called the Ultras, and some of them don't have a very good reputation. So there were 2 boys in particular, aged 12, decided that they would form their own group, just coming along to games on their own. You can make your own flags. You can practice your drumming. It became a youth club, and it flourished and flourished and flourished. We managed to get on some worldwide, global FIFA initiative about good altars across the world. And this was the big pro teams in France and Spain and Italy. They made a couple of particularly good tifos in the youth club. So they were held in very high esteem. So I was delighted for them. And, the players love them. You can see that at the end of the game, win or lose, the players go over and, the youngsters come down and give them a high five and ask them to autograph whatever they've got. So it's been a great success story for us. And it gives these youngsters, the boys and girls, a real sense of belonging.
Years ago, you submitted a nomination of your father to the Civilian Medal of Honor Awards, and I just happened to be one of the screeners. And your story touched me, so I thought I'd reach out. Of course, Jane is anonymous. She did not want to reveal her identity, and I very much welcome you to the podcast and appreciate you sharing your and your father's story.
What's actually crazy about all of this is that my siblings and I, we always knew that he was a great father to us. What was surprising was at his funeral, how many people just approached us with touching stories about acts that my father performed that we just, we had no idea about. A couple of stories. And so we did know that occasionally my father would drive other veterans to the VA hospital to just if they couldn't drive themselves or if they had no way to get there. So we knew that he occasionally did that to help fellow veterans out. What we didn't know is one man came up to us and told us about a time that father drove him sometimes and he was in need of an operation. And my father knew that he was struggling financially. And so behind the scenes, totally unknown to the fellow, he went and he paid his medical bill. And the he, the guys he paid for, he didn't know about it until later on. My dad didn't tell him either. It was just, I had no idea. We had no idea.
Tell me the origin story of jazz in Charleston.
Well, I'll try to shorten it as best I can, but we tend to point to one specific spot in the Jenkins Orphanage as being what we affectionately refer to as a cradle of jazz. So 1891, 1892, somewhere around there, Reverend Daniel Jenkins stumbled across these boys that really they were orphans. He didn't know it at the time, but he shortly discovered that they were orphans and they were living out of a abandoned boxcar. And he went to the city and asked for a little bit of help. And he and his church organized what became known as Jenkins Orphanage. And so it was at this orphanage where Reverend Jenkins made available the opportunity for the residents there to learn different trades or crafts, things like painting or simple carpentry and stuff like that. One of the things that he decided to do was to have a music class. And at that time, the music of the day were military marches that they would learn. And they would end up ragging, what we call ragging the march. And that was just some little simple inflections and things like that. They weren't playing anything that was ridiculously outlandish or we hadn't gotten to bebop or any of the fancier things. They were just changing up the music. So technically, that's jazz. And while our sister cities like New Orleans, places like that, they will claim to be the origin, we believe that the same things that were happening in New Orleans were happening in Charleston.
Are there any notable names, any interesting stories about they played with and where they went?
Yeah, the ones that I refer to quite a bit are going to be there's William Cat Anderson. He came to the orphanage at an early age. I think he was about 4. But he learned how to play the trumpet and he went on to become arguably one of the greatest lead trumpet players of all time and spent a good 20 plus years with Duke Ellington as his primary lead trumpet player. You also have Freddie Green, the guitarist extraordinaire who many people in the jazz community will point to him and say that he is the greatest rhythm guitarist of all time. He played with the Count Basie Orchestra for just under 50 years, about 49 straight years. He was born here in Charleston, South Carolina. And in fact, it was a group of orphans from the Jenkins Orphanage that he had seen in their travels throughout the state and the southeastern part of the United States. And so there's that about the plunger mute. And when I talk to students about that, and I remind them that when they watch Charlie Brown and they talk to an adult and you hear that wah wah sound, that's actually a trombone player with a plunger mute. So more Charleston in some of the most famous cartoons ever.
So many of these stories, the origin from Africa of this unique rhythm that grew up in the Gullah Geechee community in the States, that came from a pretty horrible story, right? And Jenkins, these kids were poor. They were using this as a fundraising effort so that they could survive. How does music unite and uplift, and why is it so important?
You know, jazz is one of the most, to use the word, democratic type of musical communication that you can have. Because anytime that you are in a jazz situation and you're performing, you are listening to somebody else in the band and you are getting ideas from those other persons, whoever is playing in your groups.
So, what makes Charleston jazz so unique?
So Charleston Jazz had this need in 2008 that there really needs to be an official organization that works on it every single day to support this art form here in Charleston and beyond. And so since there is such an incredible history here in Charleston, it seemed like we have got to make sure that this tradition continues, to make sure you have someone like Charleston Jazz intentionally raise funds and provides performance opportunities for musicians and brings the community together around this art form. And then a few years later, in 2017, the organization had an opportunity to begin a school to train young people and to give them opportunities to learn music and jazz in particular. And so anyone that that we can find that would like to enroll in our programs, they can do so no matter of their background or financial availability for it. So
Amazing.
Now we have a young lady who's currently at our school, and she started in middle school, and when she was in the middle school band there, coming into the high school band, she was very shy, and she played the trombone. You can't play the trombone and be shy. You know, it's too obvious. The horn, everyone wants to hear it.
Right.
And the Lynx took her under their wing. After Manny left, they took her under their wing. So they had a Christmas party, and they wanted her to come and play, and she was freaking out. She had never played in front of a crowd of people, and I said, "There's nothing to it. Pick a song you want to play." And so she said, "Okay, how about All I Want for Christmas Is You?" And I said, "Great. There are backing tracks for that. We can make this work."
Yeah.
So we worked on it. Well, we go to the thing, and she gets up, and she explodes. She just blows up. She blooms. It's like she plays it, and she's playing it out there. She's going to town. She's doing great, and they give her a standing ovation at the end.
No kidding.
It was awesome.
Wow.
So that's the true story of train spotting. That a small group, I think Spartans have 30 employees, full-time employees. And this small group of dedicated people can help thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in North Edinboro. And that's the whole point of the podcast. Just one person at a time doing a beautiful act can make such a huge difference. And because of what they've done, thousands of kids in North Edinboro are going up. That's right.